Welcome to the Payday with Rayray podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rachel Bell. I'm here to make your life easier as an entrepreneur and teach you everything I've learned about building multiple seven-figure online businesses. And on this podcast, I'll be giving you my best advice, trainings, and mindset shifts so you can grow your business and, most importantly, make every day your payday. Hey, yo, welcome back to Payday with Rayray. This is episode 2, and I'm talking all about how I made my first $100,000 on social media. No ads, no paid advertising at all. And I'm also going to break down all of my tragic mistakes because you can't have success without failure. You know, that's just part of the building blocks of success. And I'd love to break down, the journey, the rise, the fall, and everything in between for you so that you understand that the journey to where you want to be is just not linear. And I really, a lot of people told me that at the beginning and continue to tell me that. And yet sometimes we can trap ourselves into this way of thinking that's like, oh, if I don't win all the time, if I'm not always successful, if every single thing I launch isn't a banger, then I'm a failure. And it's just not true. It just needs to happen like that. So I'd love to break down what has happened in my first big break in entrepreneurship. When I first made my first 100K, I believe it was 2017, where I was looking at my profit and loss statement for the year. And I will never forget the feeling of looking at that first yearly profit and loss statement and seeing that I had made over $120,000 in the last 6 months. And I will also never forget all of the mental breakdowns, the humiliation, and the failure that I endured to get to that point. So in this episode, I'll be giving you the most honest, raw, and uncensored story of what it took me to make my first 6 figures on social media. And I'll take you back to the beginning and show you all my best moves and, of course, all of my costly mistakes as well so that you can not learn the hard way. You can just learn from Rayray. Before we go into it, I want to let you know this episode is brought to you by Online Coach University, my business. And inside of Online Coach University, we offer a variety of educational programs. Our most popular is Online Coach Accelerator, which teaches you how to monetize your social media audience. This is specifically for online coaches who want to learn how to find their niche, package an irresistible offer, sell using their content on social media, build a profitable audience, and of course, sell with confidence and authenticity. So if that's interesting to you, you can go ahead and check out onlinecoachaccelerator.com. And as of right now, our next class is opening in February of 2020. So if you are interested in getting involved in the next class that we run for OCA, go ahead and sign up for the waitlist on that website so that you are the first to know when we open enrollment, because normally when we do this, we sell out of spots really, really quickly. And if this is something that you really want to do for the new year and you want to start your business off on the right foot, then I would highly recommend just adding yourself to the waitlist so that you can take advantage of the opportunity when we open up enrollment. Alrighty, so let me take you back to the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. Just to give you a little bit of context, it wasn't like the first business that I started made 6 figures. That was the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, I had tried starting a membership site for like $29 a month. I had tried starting a coaching business for teen girls called Free Spirit Girl, where I would do workshops and webinars and things like that for teen girls to teach them about body image, self-confidence, and leadership. And that was a big passion of mine because I had dealt with a lot of those issues growing up. And so I wanted to give back. And I was super, super inspired by a couple different coaching figures in my life that I was exposed to, some of which, were like Tony Robbins and Gabby Bernstein and people who were just focused on personal development. And I really wanted to do that as well. So I tried doing that. I tried creating an online magazine at one point. That was a flop. I tried creating a podcast. That was oh my God, I cringe. I cringe thinking about my first podcast and how long I spent trying to figure out what my intro was going to be. And it's funny because from all the learning that I've done for my entrepreneurial journey, I totally understand and believe that messy action is just the best thing you can possibly do in your life and in your business, because slaving over my podcast intro and the perfect music and the perfect thing to say and what's going to get people to really listen. And I wasn't realizing that it didn't matter how perfect my intro was. The content mattered. And I didn't really have quality content to share at that time. So nothing really worked out the way that I wanted it to. I also tried starting a YouTube channel, a blog, a website building agency, a graphic design agency. And I want to keep in mind, and let you know that during all of these times when which I was starting all of these businesses and trying to get it off the ground, I would probably try it for just a couple months at a time and then move on to something else. And I really had a hard time sticking to the mission because I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And I think this is one of the most mysterious and frustrating parts of being at the beginning of your business. You really don't know what's going to work until it works. And because of that, you're constantly battling with this sense of, am I wasting my time? Am I actually going to make this work? Shiny object syndrome enters your life in such an consuming way where you're constantly questioning your ideas. You're like, is this going to work? It should be the next thing. What if I do this instead? You're looking at other people around you and you're constantly questioning your own model and your plan and trying to get validation from freebies or courses or influencers online. And you're just like, where do I even start? Shiny object syndrome was something that I really struggled with in the beginning, but ultimately through all of these different failed endeavors and abandoned endeavors, I realized that above anything else, if I wanted to be self-employed and if I wanted to actually be successful, I needed to learn marketing and sales, because that was where I always fell flat. I knew that I had good ideas. Like if I actually knew how to market and sell all of those things, I would probably be relatively successful. I would at least be able to make 100K if I really put my nose to the grindstone and I didn't look up and I would just stayed super, super hyper focused on those things and I didn't, get distracted by other options. I would probably be successful in any of those endeavors. But because I had shiny object syndrome, and I also knew that I needed to learn marketing and sales in order to become self-employed and make myself a full-time income, I knew that I needed to monetize at least one of my existing skill sets. And throughout this entire time of me being an entrepreneur, trying to be an entrepreneur, being a wantrepreneur, I was not paying attention to one request that always kept coming in. And just to give you a little bit of background, when I first graduated high school, I actually moved to Australia to pursue an internship in a business that was a coaching business. And I was running the back end of that business. I was putting on workshops and seminars and things of that nature and camps. And I was helping the owner with a lot of the processes, systems, design, just everything, writing, just all the things. During that time, though, because I didn't really have the best visa to have a steady job in Australia, and it was an unpaid internship, I knew that I needed some sort of online way to make money. And what I had known that I was able to do was grow Instagram accounts. It was super easy back in the day. This was 2014, a little bit of 2013. It was super easy to grow Instagram accounts through hashtags, through just good content, through collaborations. And so I was really, really good at growing Instagram accounts. And I would grow some Instagram accounts for fun, like quote pages. I had a couple of spiritual pages or vegan pages because I was vegan at the time. And my first client ever for Instagram growth was a vegan fitness model named Chrissy, who I'm always so grateful for because she gave me my first kind of introduction into what it looked like to work for a client. And so my deal with her was, all right, Chrissy, I'm going to offer you my Instagram growth services for $200 a month. I'm going to grow your account. And in exchange, I would like you to write me a meal plan. And so she did, and we did a little trade. And even though I didn't get paid, from her came a couple of referrals. But I give you that background because I had actually been ignoring the fact that I was getting referrals and I didn't really take it seriously because it wasn't something that I necessarily felt super, super passionate about at the time. I was like, okay, I know that people want Instagram growth, but I really want to be coaching. I really want to be doing X, Y, Z. Or I really want to be doing a podcast or a YouTube channel. I wanted to start off by being kind of a thought leader instead of establishing myself first through just something like a regular schmegular business. And so because I was so caught up in wanting to do what my most immediate passion was, I wasn't able to see the opportunity right in front of me until I had that epiphany that I needed to learn marketing and sales in order to get ahead and actually become self-employed. Because let's be honest, it doesn't matter how skilled you are. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. It doesn't matter how competent and qualified you are as an expert if you do not know how to communicate that value to someone else in front of you. I see so many experts probably you listening right now who have a wealth of knowledge and experience around a topic, yet there's some sort of disconnect where people are not able to see the value when you explain what it is you do for people. And because of that, they're not hurling their credit cards at you. They're not giving you their unconditional trust, love, and affection. They're not really giving you loyalty or payment because they don't really understand the value of what you offer. So I knew that I needed to learn that. And so finally, when I woke up to the fact that that's what I needed to focus on, I started absorbing so much content from the marketing and sales OGs. And Jay Abraham was actually one of the people that I started with learning from. If you haven't listened to the last episode, go ahead and do that, where I interview Jay Abraham in episode 1. It's a really, really golden interview. And I break down basically all the questions that I've always wanted to ask him since the beginning of my journey. But when I first started learning about marketing and sales, I realized that I already had a significant amount of demand for Instagram growth. And so I put my ego aside and I said, okay, I'm going to go all in on this. I'm going to try it for a year. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not going to try anything else. I'm going to totally focus and give myself no way out and burn the bridges basically and make sure that I understand how to grow this business. Because if I don't understand how to grow a business, then there's no way that I can do what I'm actually passionate about and what I love for a living. And if I just dedicate a year to completely growing the shit out of this business, I wonder what will happen. Because the only thing that was really stopping me from going all in was the fear that if I went all in, it wouldn't be the right idea. But because I had a significant amount of demand, and by significant, I just mean like I had a couple people asking me every now and again for this service. They're like, hey, I heard that you did this for this person. Is that something you still offer? And initially I'd be like, sure, it's like $100 a month or $200 a month. And it would be one way for me to kind of pay my bills and make my way through life, barely. But I wasn't really paying attention to it. But once I had that epiphany, once I decided to go all in, things completely changed. So I want to share with you a little bit about the birth of my agency and the Instagram growth and marketing agency that I built up to 7 figures over the past couple of years. Recently, I've dissolved the agency to focus on OCU completely, but I want to share with you what I focused on for the first part of that year, because obviously I made my first $100,000, $120,000 in the last 6 months of the year. But the first 6 months of the year, I wasn't really making anything, to be honest. And it was really, really challenging because I had promised myself I would focus for a year. I would gun it for 100K. I really, really wanted to make sure that I had that knowledge enough to make that result come into fruition. But I focused on all the wrong things for the first part of the year. And I want to share with you the top 3 things that I focused on when I first started the agency that were a complete waste of time. And I'm going to share with you what I would have focused on instead if I had known better. The first thing that I focused on, instead of focusing on the right things, was my website. I really, really wanted a good website. And this is the first thing that I started with pretty much any idea that I had in the past. I knew that if I wanted to do a podcast, or if I wanted to do this, or if I wanted to do that, I need to make a website first. That was where I usually started with my new ideas. So I had a bunch of websites, like 6 or 7 websites that were just like ghost towns and completely vacant because I would build the website and then move on to a different idea. So with the agency, the first part of the 6 months of the year, I was really focused on creating a website or finding the right person to build a website. And what a lot of people think a website exists for doesn't actually serve the utility that we need it to do, right? So normally when we build a website, we're doing that because we want someone to go to the website and be convinced of the offer and be convinced that this is something that they need to invest in, right? But instead of focusing primarily on the offer itself and on the value that we can offer someone who needs this product or this service, I focused just on the aesthetics of the website, and I just wanted it to look pretty. I wanted it to look professional. I wanted it to garner trust from anyone who had gone to the website and say, oh, this looks legit. I should totally hire them. But what I didn't realize is that it doesn't matter how pretty your website is. In fact, it doesn't even matter if you have a website. In fact, in Online Coach Accelerator, I don't teach people to build websites. I teach them to build irresistible offers and package it into a little PDF that completely explains everything from top to bottom, including their story and why they started and their testimonials and case studies, so that they don't have to waste time building a website that won't ultimately serve their purpose. Additionally, websites are not really usually built for action. If you were building something for action, like to get the reader or the website viewer to take a specific action, you would want to build some sort of a landing page, which is just like a one-page website that gives you all the information that you need and a button to apply or a button to buy the service or the offer. And so I started off with the website, torturing myself over who's going to build this website? How am I going to do it without, going over budget? What is it going to look like? What pictures are we going to use? Oh my gosh, I need to do a photo shoot so that I have pictures for the website, yada, yada, yada. And that was just a complete waste of time. And it took so long that we never actually went live with a website until much, much later in our business, probably when we hit around 60, 70K per month. At that point, we finally said, okay, now it's time to build a website. But in the first part of the year, that's kind of what I was obsessed with because I thought that's what I needed in order to convince people of the offer. However, in reality, what I actually needed in order to convince people of the offer is a good fucking offer. Wow, mind blown, right? Who would have thunk it? But it's funny because we don't often start from the actual place we need to. We want to start with what seems easy or what seems exciting to us first. And that's just not often where we need to start. So instead of making the offer irresistible and mapping out exactly what the client could expect at each stage of the journey and what our results were and all those different things, I wanted to start with the website. That was a big waste of time. The second thing that I started with in terms of the first part of the year and what I really wanted to focus on, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the website, is branding. I wanted to have like a really pretty brand. I wanted it to feel good. I wanted it to be expressive of like my personality and all this stuff. And I was too focused on expressing myself through my business to realize that it didn't even mean anything about me. In fact, the business didn't exist for me. The business exists for the client and the client only. And a lot of times where business owners get confused or entrepreneurs get confused in the beginning of their whole shindig in their business is they try to express themselves through their business so much that they lose touch with what the ideal client avatar actually needs from them. So they get too focused on trying to express themselves, trying to like make everyone understand who they are, instead of trying to understand the ideal client avatar and make something that actually solves their problems. So in the beginning of the year, I was focused too much on branding instead of the story of my agency. Now, if I had focused on the story of my agency, that would have been so different than focusing on the branding. And when I say branding, it's not a bad investment of time and energy and money for branding, but branding is ultimately built through sales, and I'll explain what that means in just a moment. But when it comes to branding, a lot of times we think of, okay, what's my color palette? What's my fonts? What's my pictures going to look like? What's my brand words? How do I want people to feel? What type of brand do I have? Blah, 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 blah. And that's kind of necessary at first, just for you to have an understanding of where your positioning is in the marketplace. But what's more important than anything else for your positioning and for your authoritative stance is the story that you tell about why you exist. So for example, when my agency was growing, and when it was in high demand, we made the decision to and when I say we, I had built this business with my partner, Ross, at the time, and we were working together on this. So we had decided that we wanted to be the top organic Instagram growth agency in the US. That's it. It was very, very niched down. But if we had told a story about why that was, we would have had a very different upcoming, growth curve, because we weren't actually telling the story of why that was important. And here's why it's important. At the time, a lot of people were using automation softwares. They were using bots, they were using fake growth accounts, they were buying likes, buying followers, and it was getting saturated in a way that people were not actually seeing real results from their Instagram accounts because they were just botting it up. They were using automation softwares that were limiting their reach. And it goes against Instagram's terms of service completely to use automation. Like they know if you're using automation or if you've used automation in the past, and they're not going to play nice if that's the case, because they want the most authentic user experience possible. So of course, if there are a bunch of people replacing their actual presence with a bunch of bots and automation, that's not going to play well with the Instagram algorithm. So instead of telling people that, we weren't actually telling people the dangers of using automation, or we weren't telling people the dangers of what other strategies we're using and why it was important for people to embrace organic growth on Instagram. Instead, we were just focused on the branding. But if I could go back in time, what I would have started with and focused on completely would have been the story of my agency and why it was a different solution than what anyone's seen before. And then the third thing that I focused on for the first part of the year that kind of resulted in failure for the first part of the year is having no ideal client avatar. I had a niche. I knew that I wanted to do organic growth and marketing on Instagram and management, but I didn't have an ideal client avatar. So what that meant was I knew that this is a service that I provide, but I didn't really know who was the perfect person to buy it. And I didn't really know who my favorite type of client would work with, not just personality-wise and business-wise, but also could they get the maximum amount of results that I had to offer? Like we couldn't really figure out who the ideal client avatar would be for us to enjoy our lives the most, but also for them to get the maximum amount of results possible with our service. So instead of starting with the ideal client avatar and working backwards from there, which is what I encourage everyone to do now in my programs, we started with the niche or the offering. And then we tried to figure out who the ideal client avatar would be based on who signed up, with luck. And so that was a really backwards way of going about it. And that's what a lot of people go about doing. Is they say, okay, I want to offer this service. This is my idea. Instead of starting with who out there has a specific problem that I can solve and what exactly do they need it to look like in order for them to feel comfortable and excited to put down their credit card for this and feel like they're getting results and not just like they're getting air or fluff, right? So those are the top 3 mistakes that I made in the first part of my business in that year. But things started turning around when we started running different promotions. And so we were using social media. At the time, we were focused on Facebook. I was really, really focused on creating content on Facebook, on my personal page. And we had made this little Facebook group that had like maybe 50 or 100 members in it at the time. And we were just trying to add all of our friends to the Facebook group so that we could focus on Instagram growth inside of there. So a couple things that we did to run promotions in the beginning that got us a little bit of momentum, but I still would have done it differently. I want to share those with you. The first thing we did that worked, but not as well as it could have, is eBooks. Yes, the infamous eBook strategy. So if you don't know about eBooks and why they exist, they are basically meant to be the first free piece of material that someone consumes from you that gains, their trust in you. So basically, you're supposed to put in this ebook, your methodology and some results, and just give them an overview of what it is you do. And our ebook was called How to Gain 10K Followers in 30 Days. And this ebook was good. We got a lot of downloads, but here's where it kind of fell short. The ideal client avatar was not on point. We realized that the type of person who wanted just a vanity metric wasn't actually an entrepreneur, because most of the time we were trying to sign on people who had real businesses because they had an actual budget for marketing. They had an actual budget for growth. So it made sense for them to hire our service for a really long time to grow and get more customers. But when we offered this ebook, it got tons of downloads because everyone wanted to know how to make, how to get 10K followers in 30 days. But the right people that we were actually trying to reach didn't care about that as much as they cared about how to 10x your revenue on Instagram. Because a lot of times the business owners that we were trying to attract as clients, they don't care about vanity metrics. They care about what is this going to do for my bottom line. So we weren't really speaking to that point. And because of that, we got a lot of downloads for the ebook, but hardly any clients. So the next thing that we tried that was, it was good, but not good enough, was the webinar strategy. So we would try to run webinar classes or live streams or something like that. We tried really, really hard to make that happen for our agency. And potentially, if it worked well, we would run ads to the webinar, but we didn't have enough traffic to really validate whether or not our webinar presentation was good enough. And we didn't have enough traffic to validate anything. In fact, we would do a webinar and we would have like 6 attendees. And at the end of the webinar, nobody would buy. And so we didn't know if it was just like, it's a numbers game. Like if we had 100 people, maybe 2 would have bought and then we would have 4K in income. And then that would make sense for us to do more webinars. We didn't have enough data, we didn't have enough traffic, and we realized that if we have really, really small audiences, webinars are really tough to get a good grasp on how many people you need coming into your traffic flow in order for you to convert them into clients. So because we didn't have enough traffic for that, it was a hard thing to measure. It was really, really hard for us to stay consistent with that because it didn't make sense. It was a large amount of promotion, a large amount of effort and exertion for very little return. So we scratched that idea. And then the next thing that worked really, really well for us was long form Facebook posts and a Facebook group. And this is where the secret sauce kind of comes into play. In my, job at the time, I was working as a virtual assistant in a company that was a really, really interesting company. It was a great opportunity because you could come on board and you could just label out your skill sets and say, okay, I'm good at writing, I'm good at graphic design, I'm good at building websites, yada, yada, yada. And then you got to select the projects that you wanted to work with from their client database. So clients would upload projects and you would just pick up the projects that you thought you could do a really good job with and then deliver it. So at the time, I was doing a virtual assistant job and I had done a lot of copywriting. And that's where I first learned that copywriting was a huge need in businesses. And when I say copywriting, I really mean writing a post with the intention of getting the reader to take an action. And that's what we call direct response copywriting. So I had, through this virtual assistant company, I learned that so many entrepreneurs needed help with the direct response copywriting, and they were constantly uploading projects around writing and copywriting and all that stuff. So I kind of took a leaf out of that book and I looked at what they were focused on. And I'm like, I'm going to focus on this for my own business. And so while I was trying to leave that job and go full-time in my agency, I started writing long form Facebook posts, which were basically structured in a way where I would write posts like similar to what I was writing for my clients at the time. And I wanted people to completely understand our methodology. I wanted people to completely understand the value that we could provide as an agency. And so I was writing these long posts on Facebook, and part of me didn't think that anyone would read it, but people did read it. They were reading it and they were joining my Facebook group as a result. And it worked like a charm to get sales calls. In fact, we had done one promotion that was so epic and so irresistible, but it actually failed so much because of me. I'll tell you my biggest humiliation ever in just a second. But what happened was we made a post on Facebook one day that was like, hey, we're going to do this irresistible offer. We're only offering this to, 20 people max. And here's the deal. I will grow your account to 10,000 followers or buy 10,000 followers in the next 30 days. And if I don't do it, you don't have to pay me. And I'll do it all through organic growth methods. I will not buy any followers. I'm not going to use any automation. I'm not going to use any bots, just purely organic social media growth. I'm going to invest my own time, money, and energy into doing this. And if I don't do it, then you don't have to pay me. It's basically just pay after results. But if I do it, then here's what the agreement looks like. You would pay me X amount every month, and we would go on for 3 months together. So because of this irresistible offer, everyone was like popping off, and this Facebook post just absolutely blew up. And I got, dozens and dozens of comments on it, people asking for a sales call. And so me and my partner at the time, Ross, we were super excited, and we were talking about, okay, like we'd never done a sales call before. What are we going to do? And how are we going to do this? And Ross, my partner at the time, was like, well, Rachel, you're really good with people. So how about you do the sales calls? And I was like, okay, I'm good with people. You're right. I'll do the sales calls. Biggest mistake ever. Just because I did not have any experience with sales calls. Yeah, I can talk to people, but it's completely different having an actual sales conversation with someone. So here's what happened. As a result of us getting all of those leads and all those opportunities, I scheduled a bunch of sales calls on my calendar. And I had my first sales call, and it went for, I think we budgeted around 20 minutes for it, but it went over like an hour and a half long. And I was explaining the entire process. I was explaining exactly what we were going to do on her account. I was giving her a custom strategy. And she said, this is the best sales call I've ever had. Let me think about it. And at the time I was like, okay, sure. Yeah, think about it. I don't really know what that means. So sure. And I didn't follow up or anything. I didn't get a date from her about when she was going to be able to stop thinking about it and things like that. So yeah, so that first one, I was like a little bit hopeful of, because I was like, okay, She's just thinking about it, which means she might come back and actually sign up. So I'll just go on to the next sales call. Did the next sales call. Again, it went over like an hour long. I was giving as much information as humanly possible. I was trying to prove my expertise. I was trying to make them feel safe and comfortable with the fact that I'm an expert. And I was just basically word vomiting all over them about what I was going to do for them. And I get the same response. This is great. This is such an amazing opportunity. Let me think about it. And after seeing this happen around 10 times, or just getting straight out, no, I'm not going to do it, I started to feel like a crazy person. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, they already know the offer and then they get on the phone call with me and then they're not signing up. This is going the exact opposite way that I want it to. And out of 20 or something sales calls that I had, I would say literally 0 of them signed on. 0. And I want you to let that sink in. I had 20 sales calls of people who knew the offer and it was an irresistible offer and they didn't even have to pay me if I didn't get the result. And I still lost the motherfucking deals. That was my first sales call experience. Was it traumatic? Absolutely. That was traumatic for me. Holy shit. I remember going into my bathroom at the time. I was sharing an apartment with Ross and I went into the bathroom. I think Ross was home or something in another room. And I turn on the sink and I turn on the poop fan or whatever the fan is in there. I call it the poop fan because obviously like you turn it on when you poop, right? I don't know. And I had the water running and everything just to mask the sound of me weeping. And I wish I could go back in time and just not be so hard on myself, but I really felt like I had failed. I really felt like I had failed not just myself, but my partner at the time. And I really felt like I had just really screwed up our one big break and our one big opportunity. And we were still working these jobs we didn't want to be working in. And that was our one big, huge promotion that I knew that if we got a bunch of responses with, we would eventually be able to sign up our first clients. And at the time, we didn't have a client. We didn't have a single client paying us monthly for anything. We were just doing free work, or we were doing trades, or we were just trying to get exposure. We didn't really have paying clients to give us stability financially. And so we were just doing all of this with faith. And because of that, I felt like I had severely let myself down. I had let down the clients on the sales calls. I felt like I let down my partner. I felt like I let down everyone. And I just wanted to hide. And I just wanted to just quit. I really just wanted to just be like, I never want to do another sales call again. I fucked it up. I am not good at this. I'll never be an entrepreneur. I don't have what it takes. That was really my internal dialogue at that time. And it was really heartbreaking to be in that space. And luckily, I had a supportive partner, and he was, he was not mad with me. He was just a little disappointed, and as it makes sense to be. But at that time, I was like, I gotta learn sales. I have to recover from this, and I absolutely have to figure out what went wrong. And I think one of my biggest lessons was at that time, I'll break it down into 3 biggest lessons from that whole endeavor. And this is right before we actually got our first client and we really started popping off. So my 3 biggest lessons from that time in building the agency in the first 6 months was that, number 1, the brand is not built through a website. It's not built through the color palette. It's not built through fonts. It's not built through anything pretty. It's built through sales. And I mentioned this earlier, and I want to expand upon what this means. Your brand is built through reputation. It's what people say about you when you're not looking or when you're not listening. And so the best way to get people to talk about your business is through experience working with you. So that means you need to make sales in order to build your brand. And then people start telling the story about your agency, why you exist. Or maybe you're not having an agency, you're having a coaching business or a consulting business or a service providing business of some kind. You want people to be able to tell the story of why they signed up and what you do for them, so that your brand is built through sales and it's not built through just a pretty website. A pretty website will not take you nearly as far as having a strong brand built through sales will. So that's one thing I wish I learned earlier on, but I learned it the hard way. The second thing I learned was that the ideal client avatar is what the business should be centered around at all times. And this would have helped me understand why some of my sales calls seemed more exciting than others, and why some of my sales calls were almost yeses and I would have almost got them versus complete no's and complete bad fits. And there were some people that I got on the phone with and I was like, I don't think I can help you. This isn't really a good fit. And I realized that I could have avoided a lot of that confusion by being more narrow and more focused around who I wanted to work with, not necessarily what I was offering. And then the third biggest lesson that I learned was that I absolutely cannot skimp out on mentorship and guidance, like direct mentorship and guidance, because a lot of times when we get started in our business, we want to buy like a $300 course, or we want to buy like a $200 ebook or something like that, or a little mini course or training on whatever we think we need to learn at that time in order to make money. But what we truly need is a comprehensive, customized strategy that's proven to work for our industry. That's what we actually need. And we need to have the focus, accountability, and the support in order to actually implement all of the things we know we need to implement. Half of you listening right now know what you need to do next. You know what you need to do next, but you're not doing it. So why is that? It's probably because you don't have a mentor in your corner looking at your progress and telling you, hey, that's a great idea, move forward with that. Or, hey, that's not a good idea, don't move forward with that. Or, here's the plan, here's the strategy, here's what you need to implement and at what phase of your business you need to implement it with. And ultimately, someone needs to be there to be able to call you out on all of your bullshit and your limiting beliefs and make sure that you're moving forward into your highest self, not just the self of you that is focused on survival and scarcity. All right. So on that note of mentorship, let me tell you about the story of me investing in my first mentor. I had been following this fellow on social media, and he specialized in helping people scale to 6 and 7 figures. His name was Scott Oldford. And I was following him on social media, and I was talking to him every now and again. And he took interest to me because he knew that we were on to something and that we had a large amount of potential with the agency based on the demand and the right time at the right place. He knew that we had a lot of potential, but there was no way, because I didn't really have my first client, that I could invest his fees into mentorship with him. And so I was kind of just talking to him all the time, sending him messages. I was like, dude, I think this strategy is going to work, but I'm not sure. I don't really know what to do. And he did me a huge favor by offering me basically just a few calls for an investment of $5,000. And so that was a big discount from his usual rates. And he just did it basically out of kindness, but also out of seeing a large amount of potential with my business. And so he was like, $5,000, we'll get a couple calls and I'll help you with your strategy. And I'll basically tell you what is a good idea and what's not a good idea. Now, here's the kicker. Did I have $5,000 in my bank account? Absolutely not. I did not have $5,000 in my bank account. I think I barely had like $2,000 in my bank account at the time. And I was like, okay, I'm in, Scott, but like what, just give me a couple days to figure out how to come up with the money. And so I made a bunch of posts trying to get clients. We had just landed our first ever client for $2,000 per month. The following day, I think it was right around the same time. And because of that influx of income, and I worked some extra hours at my job, and I had applied for like PayPal credit to get some extra disposable cash, and I had taken out a credit card as well, I was definitely committed, and I actually went into debt to make this first investment. But then our first client came in. We were like, oh my gosh, this is our first client. Holy shit. We were focused so much on making sure that she was successful. Because of that investment, I realized that it wasn't really about the strategy that I was taught during that mentorship experience. It was more about the permission that I gained to just go hard and completely believe in myself and apply every strategy that I had thought of. I would be like, is this a good idea? He'd be like, yep, it's going to work. Do it. And because I had the certainty of someone telling me that it was going to work or that it might work, then I went at it and it was able to provide a large amount of return. And I made back that investment within the next couple of months for sure, and then some. And at that point, we left our jobs. It was a massive risk to leave our jobs because we didn't have a ton of, guaranteed income. We didn't have a ton of money in the bank at all. But we knew that on this curve that was slightly going upward, if we just focused on that completely, then something would happen. We just knew that something would happen. So at that point, we quit our jobs And it was kind of a snowball effect after that. We started getting referrals. We started being able to focus completely our energy, our minds, our souls, our spirits on our business. And then we started getting written about in different articles. And then we sent out downloadable guides to hundreds of people. And just through word of mouth and through social media alone, we were able to grow significantly within the next 6 months. And because of that as well, we had a large amount of top of mind awareness. We were the only agency that was completely focused on organic marketing on Instagram through going viral and hashtags and all those things at the time. And because of that, people would be referring us to others without even working with us prior. For example, if someone had posted on Facebook, who's the best at Instagram growth, people would recommend us even if they hadn't worked with us before, just because we were the first people that came to mind when the words organic marketing on Instagram came up. So I started on Instagram stories at that time just as a personal brand, and I started opening up about what we were doing with our clients and how we were providing results to them and things of that nature. And people started responding like crazy. And I showed people our strategy. I showed people our results on Instagram stories. And I realized that Instagram stories was going to be one of the biggest sources of clientele in the next 6 months as well. And because of that, we got opened up to a lot of amazing opportunities. I got a chance to speak at Spanx headquarters in Atlanta. I got featured in media like Forbes, Entrepreneur Inc. We were able to work with a lot of high-level celebrities and influencers, and we worked our way up to working with some of the most elite in the industry. And I also met some really cool friends through doing that as well. But through starting on Facebook and then trying all those different strategies and really just putting ourselves out there like as much as we humanly could, to the point where some people were like annoyed by us talking about the same shit all the time, we were able to establish top of mind awareness, get featured in media, expand our social presence just through referrals and word of mouth. And of course, then when I took it into Instagram stories and started showing people the results and the behind the scenes of what we were doing, they were like, oh, you actually know what you're doing. Look at those results. It's kind of hard not to pay attention to someone when they show you that they've gotten 8 million views on a video that was posted 19 hours earlier. And that's the type of results we were pulling at the time with going viral. We were teaching our clients how to go viral and how to create content that really converted new followers to follow. Because of that, people started taking us really, really seriously. Now, during that time of the come up, we had started making 10K per month. I remember our first 10K month, we did a little happy dance, but also a little stressed out dance as well, because mo money, mo problems, you know what I mean? And with an agency especially, there were a lot of invisible challenges that even though it looked like we were being super successful on the outside, and honestly, our bank account was showing that we were being more and more successful, there were 5 core invisible challenges that were very difficult to overcome during that time. So when we were looking back on our profit and loss statement of 120K in 6 months, I just couldn't stop thinking about how much we had overcome together as a team and with myself, like how much I had personally overcome. And I was reflecting on it before this podcast episode, and I wanted to bring you back to that time in which I had a total clarity around what my challenges were during that 6-month period where we were really having a lot of success. And I want to break down the 5 invisible challenges that we were struggling with during that time so that you understand kind of the background, because it's not all just sunshine and rainbows. When you make 100K, certain problems go away, like you don't have to worry about paying rent, but new problems arise. And the deal with business is that you will always be solving problems. And the key is to never look at something like it's a problem. Always look at it like it's a puzzle. And that's one thing that absolutely saved my sanity during my business growth journey and continues to save my sanity, because if I view everything as a problem, that's the problem. But if I change my thinking, the problems solve themselves. So here are the 5 invisible challenges that I dealt with when we had this upward spiral of growth. The first thing was that the algorithm was changing every 1 to 2 months, which means our growth strategies had to change every 1 to 2 months, which means our clients were a little bit confused sometimes when we would change something, and we had to learn how to constantly set expectations with them and how to make them feel safe, seen, heard, and understood, while still being at the mercy of the algorithm. You know, it's a very uncertain game. And so we had to do our best to make our clients feel absolutely taken care of and like we had everything handled, even when the next change was unpredictable and we would have to change everything every single time that the algorithm changed. And we would also have to figure out how the algorithm changed every time. So it was constantly changing our offering And that was something that made the Instagram growth and management agency the most challenging business to start and grow and scale. And I'm actually really, really fucking glad that I started with an agency model instead of a coaching model, because it's significantly harder to scale an agency than it is to scale a coaching business. I would say scaling a coaching business is literally so easy. It's a piece of cake for me, but that's only because I have prior experience scaling an agency, which is like literally hell. In fact, I met someone in a coffee shop the other day who told me that her I help statement is, I help agency owners get unfucked by their business. I was like, that's so accurate, man. Because all agency owners are like, oh my gosh, they're so fucked. Because it's so difficult to have an agency and to manage all the different moving parts of that type of business model. Is it awesome to have an agency? Yeah, of course, because you have monthly recurring revenue and there's lots of amazing parts of it. However, the amount of work and effort and time it takes to manage and grow and maintain the quality of your agency it's extravagant. So yeah, that was the number one thing that was an invisible challenge to a lot of the outside world. Something we didn't expect was the fact that the algorithm was going to change, and therefore our strategy needed to change every single month. So the second thing that was a big invisible challenge was partner struggles. So at the time I was dating and business partners with my partner Ross, and we are on such good terms right now. And we have a tremendous amount of love and respect for each other because we've gone through almost a 3.5, almost 4-year relationship with one another during that time. And we were a great team for most of what we did. But that didn't mean that we didn't have struggles. You know, we had a lot of our personal life under a high level of stress because we were not only trying to figure out how to scale a business, which is hard enough to do on your own, but when you're in kind of like a power struggle with someone else, it's also very difficult to deal with that. So we had to learn how to separate our roles and really trust each other on a different level. And ultimately, the biggest lesson I learned there was to carry the weight of the team. So there would be some days where I would feel super, super off, and I would be in a not healthy emotional state to really sit down and do the business. And at that time, Ross would step in and help me, and vice versa. Whenever he wasn't in a good place or he was overloaded or overwhelmed, I would step in and help him with whatever I could do. But we separated our roles early on, and we said, okay, Rachel's going to be in charge of client management. Rachel's going to be in charge of branding. Rachel's going to be in charge of content creation. Rachel's going to be in charge of customer service, and Ross is going to be in charge of strategy. He's going to be in charge of growth strategy and things of that nature. So because of that, we had a lot of issues, and we had a lot of, I would say we didn't have many fights, but we had a lot of really intense growth experiences with one another, because one of the things that happens when you set out to start growing your business and you're like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to make $10K per month. Here we go. You think it's going to be an uphill spiral. You're going to go on a roller coaster ride, and it's going to be so fun. You're going to put your hands in the air and enjoy the ride. And sometimes that is the way that it goes. But a lot of times when we say that we want something outside of our current reality, we are forced to step up into a version of ourselves that is capable of achieving that reality, which is hardly ever the version of ourselves that we are today. So because of that, I needed to completely transform my identity. He needed to transform his identity. And together we were transforming our identities and trying to maintain a relationship and trying to scale our business and trying to deal with personal life stuff. And it was just a lot. And I'm really grateful looking back that I had that intensity at the beginning of my business journey, because it allowed me to have a significant, like an inhuman capacity for stress. I would say that I have an unreal capacity for stress these days because of what I've gone through with my agency and with my partner. And today, kind of everything seems pretty chill and pretty easy compared to what it used to be. And I'm really grateful for my struggles. So again, if you find yourself that at the beginning of your business, you're struggling a lot, just be grateful, because that's expanding your capacity for stress, and it's expanding your capacity for discomfort, which will absolutely pay off later in your life. So play the long game there. Okay, another invisible challenge that I was struggling with is self-esteem issues. Ooh, and this one hurt to admit, because at the time I really wanted to be confident in myself. I wanted to work hard, but I felt like my self-esteem was taking a hit every day because I was such a perfectionist. I was procrastinating because I was a perfectionist. And then I felt like I was always behind, and I felt like something was wrong with me. And I felt like I know what I need to do, but I just don't feel like doing it. And I'm a bad entrepreneur and all this stuff. And so my procrastination and perfectionism cycle was chipping away at my self-esteem and making me not believe in my ability to do things. And this was a huge block that I had to work through. And I invested in a lot of therapy and a lot of personal development experiences and training camps and things like that to really rebuild myself and understand the inner workings of my mind and my heart, and ultimately heal from those blocks that I had when it came to working. And I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs today who struggle with the same thing. They know what they need to do. They want to do it technically, but then when it comes down to actually sitting down and doing it, they just distract themselves with a series of seemingly harmless distractions. But at the end of the day, it's like 4 p.m. and they're like, shit, I haven't gotten anything done. And then they feel like shit about themselves. And then they think to themselves, oh, I'm not really cut out for this. So they want to give up. But then they know that they can't give up because they know that they have a mission and blah, blah, blah. It's an easy way to go fucking insane. So I had a lot of those issues in the beginning of my business. I didn't have anyone to really help me. So over time, I learned that basically the main block there was just a perfectionist and procrastinator loop that I was running. And how I get myself out of that today is I just stop being a perfectionist and I just sit down and I do the work and then it's good enough and I just send it out. But if you try to make something perfect, then you're always going to end up losing because there's no such thing as perfect. The fourth invisible challenge that I was struggling with was customer service. Customer service. Not because we had a lot of customer service issues, but one thing that I learned was that it was really hard on my heart. And I will explain a little bit more about this in the fifth invisible challenge. But some clients, it was difficult to maintain relationships with clients sometimes because sometimes they would just stop paying, they would ghost, there would be a constant stream of negativity because honestly, someone only reaches out with customer service when there's something wrong. Like hardly anyone actually reaches out to a customer service email saying, everything's going perfectly. Thank you so much. Normally they're like, hey, I can't log in. What's my password? Hey, I need this, blah, 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 blah. Hey, why did this person comment? Or what's this mean? Or why can't I get this reach on my post? Like what happened here? Blah, blah, blah. And so I was constantly answering customer service emails and I was taking it mega personally because I felt like I cared about their success more than they did sometimes. And my feelings got really hurt every single time that there was an issue. And so that brought me into my fifth invisible challenge of growing and scaling this business to 100K in 6 months, which was that I took my business way too personally instead of just viewing it as a problem solution equation. So that meant that every single time that a customer would email in with a complaint or with a suggestion or with some sort of negative expression, which as an agency happens all the time, I would take it personally and feel like shit. I would be like, oh my gosh, they forgot to log in. I bet they feel like we didn't do a good job setting that expectation. And I cared so much about what they felt. And I would always be apologetic and I would always be just feeling like I wasn't doing a good enough job, even though we were providing the best results in the industry and all of our clients were staying on for 6 months to a year sometimes with us. We would be like, I would be so heartbroken if someone had a problem. And so what I learned to do as a result of just going through the ringer quite a lot was view everything as a problem solution equation and not take anything personally in my business. But that was a huge invisible challenge as I scaled and as we got more clients, there was more customer service. And I realized that for my mental health, I needed to separate myself from the agency and stop wrapping up my personal worth and my personal validation in the business and the results that we did or didn't get for clients. So I ended the year with 120K in revenue, and that happened within like 6 months. And if I had to go back in time, here's what I would recommend to myself. I would say, Rachel, do a ton of upfront research and select a niche. Do not worry about selecting the wrong niche. Just fucking select a niche and run with it. And when I say niche, I really mean ideal client avatar. Select that one person who's going to be the best client for you to work with and the best client to see the best results, and work with that person and be totally committed to finding that person. Do not give up and do not get distracted. And then I would tell myself, also, Rachel, you need to package your high ticket service into a PDF. Ditch the website, stop making a bunch of websites, and you just need to learn that people need a short overview and potent qualifying sales call to make the decision to work with you. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to waste time. It doesn't need to be a waste of money. You just need to create the offer for the ideal client avatar, show them the overview, show them the results, and then have a sales call to answer any questions and lock them in. It's simple. And then I would also share with myself that the Facebook group was a good idea and it applies to absolutely any platform. So I would encourage myself, if I could go back in time, I would encourage myself to provide the most value possible on any platform, and you will win that way. And if I could also go back in time, I would say, get on Instagram. If you're selling Instagram services, do it on Instagram, because that's where everyone's top of mind awareness is. If you're on Instagram, you're thinking about Instagram. And so if you're saying, hey, I'll help you grow your Instagram, then that's a huge value add there. I would also say, Rachel, make sure that you're pricing your services and you're in the business growth industry or marketing and sales. Always, like, if you're pricing your services, make sure that you always frame your offer in a way that is most appealing to the business owner, not yourself. So talk about the return of investment that they're going to see, talk about the past case studies that you've helped people with, the testimonials of making money. Because if you're trying to package and position an offer to someone who ultimately only cares about their bottom line, you better be talking about the bottom line and not trying to dance around it or say, oh, well, maybe you'll grow your bottom line because we'll go viral. Like, it's really important, if you're positioning your services and you're pricing it accordingly, you need to be able to show the value to someone and how that's going to pay off for them in a really tangible way. And then I would also say, Rachel, only work with the right clients. It's worth it to have a clean track record, and you need to absolutely make sure that you're qualifying everyone who works with you to make sure that they get good results with you, and you're not just accepting clients because for the sake of them wanting to work with you. There were a lot of people that wanted to work with us early on that we knew weren't good fits. We had to turn them away, and we had to say, sorry, we don't think it's going to be a good fit. And what's funny is that they would be like, no, it will be a good fit. Please accept me as a client. And we try it with them, and then it wouldn't work, and then they would get mad. And it's just one of those things to stay so incredibly congruent with. Only work with the right clients, only work with the clients you know you can help, and be super authentic and upfront with them if you don't think that it's going to work. And then finally, my last piece of advice for myself would be, Rachel, you need mentorship. You need to stop wasting your time with courses and with freebies. You need someone who is going to be able to tell you how to connect the dots and push you along, give you permission, and hand over the blueprint that you need to see success in your industry. You need mentorship. And ultimately, that is what I would say to myself if I could go back in time and start this journey all over again. So that was my story of my first 100K on social media. Guys, I hope that was helpful for you. And ultimately, I want to remind you that if you're on this journey of entrepreneurship, and maybe you've already surpassed the 6-figure mark, or maybe you're still working on getting there, I want to remind you and encourage you to remember that it's worth it. Being self-employed is the greatest gift that life has to offer. The amount of freedom and autonomy and abundance you can experience through being self-employed is a gift like nothing else. And if you can do one thing with your life, I would strongly encourage you to at least try to be self-employed once in your life. Nothing beats being your own boss and ultimately showing yourself what you're made of. And although it's hard work, and it's a different type of hard work than almost anything else, it is worth it. Absolutely. And I would go through any amount of pain and suffering to be self-employed and to have that freedom in my life, because I know what it's worth. And I know that at the end of my life, I'm going to look back and I'm going to be like, I'm so fucking glad that I worked so hard to be here, and that I worked so hard to make all of this come into fruition. At the end of my life, I am absolutely going to look back and reflect on how lucky I feel to have the opportunity to be self-employed, and how grateful I am that I took that opportunity, because in a lot of parts of the world, we forget this is not an option. This is not a highly accessible path. But if it is for you, why not take it? Why not risk it all? Why not take the leap and show yourself what you're made of and go into the mystery of life with a curious spirit, and just being open to the possibility that you could have everything that you want in life and more. So it's worth it. Guys, thank you so much for listening. And again, one thing that I want to emphasize is the key to business growth in an exponential way, which is mentorship and guidance. And if you're a coach looking for mentorship, I built Online Coach Accelerator specifically for you. So if you want to learn more about OCA and how it can help you scale your coaching business to 6 figures and beyond, go ahead and go to www.onlinecoachaccelerator.com, and you can sign up for the waitlist right there. and we will be accepting new students starting in February. If you like this podcast, let me know, guys. And without any further ado, I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you listening to this whole story. I know that it was very, very dense. There was a lot of ups and downs and smiles and frowns and lots of takeaways. So let me know what you thought of it, and I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did find it super valuable, you just want to share it with the world, make sure you screenshot, post, and tag me on Instagram so I can stalk your profile and we can connect more. And to get notified on the next episode here on Payday, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes so you never miss a beat. Get out there, secure the bag, and I will see you next Payday.